Hello YouTube, welcome back to another episode of Easy Prepping here with your old Uncle Carl. Today we're going to talk about dry canning, storing dried food for long periods of time, like years. It can sit on the shelf as long as you have the right conditions. And to start with, I'd like to tell you that when you're storing food dry, which is primarily rice and beans, there's some other items I'll get to, but you have four enemies. Think of them as your enemy. First is air. You want to get all the air outside of the container that you've used to put your rice in. Today we're talking about rice, but this is also could include beans and other items like wheat berries and such. But air, you got to get the air out. Next, moisture. You want the inside of the container to be staying as dry as possible. After that, we have light, particularly sunlight. You don't want to be storing your dried goods here in a clear container in a south-facing windowsill. You want to keep them cool, dark, and temperature control, which is the fourth one. Temperature. You want cool, and you especially want to avoid rapid temperature changes, as that can cause condensation, which leads to moisture. Well, today on the video as an example, we're going to use just long grain white rice, which is fairly inexpensive, costs more than it used to. This 20-pound bag, I think, ran me about $7, $8 at the, you can see it's the Wally Mart brand, but I'm going to use that as an example, even though you could use these methods for other dried foods, such as wheat berries, different types of beans, corn. It goes on and on. But these same principles will apply to preserving, making shelves stable for many years, dried foods. The first method I want to show you here is using canning jars. Here's an example of one I put up March of 2020, so 3 years ago. Everything's still fine in here. This does not have any oxygen absorber or desiccant in it, as I used this contraption to suck all the air out when I sealed it, and the lid is still down, so I know that there's a vacuum in there. Vacuum makes no bugs going to be able to grow. Another point about doing rice that I forgot to mention is when you get your bag of rice home, put it in the freezer. I put it in the freezer and, well, basically forgot about it. Opened the freezer about a week later and saw the rice in there. I thought, I need to do that video. What that does is kills any little microbe or larva or anything that might be trying to produce in there. Because if you transfer that over to your container or just leave it in the bag like that, they'll start eating your rice, and you really don't want that. As I mentioned, the first way we're going to cover is storing in glass mason jars. Biggest advantage of these is they're chew proof. Mice and rats are not going to get through them. So, but they're not inexpensive, especially these big ones like this. This is one I had used for canning something else dry, and it's been washed, cleaned. It's another point, make sure all your containers are clean. And on these, make sure you've gone around the lid with something, get any dust off, so that the rubber rim on the canning lid will get a good seal. Next, I'm going to fill this with rice. Forgot, have yourself a good size funnel, much less chance of making a big mess that way. Now, I'm not going to make you sit here and watch while I fill this thing, so I'll bring you back in a minute, and we'll go on to the next step. Okay, a couple things I just remembered I forgot to mention while I was filling this is, as you fill it, you want to tamp it down real good. That makes it more compact, makes less air actually inside, or less room for air. Then you want to go ahead and fill it on up the rest of the way. And that should do nicely. Next, let's give it another wipe, get any rice dust off of there that might still be on there. We put on our lid here. We take our lid that came with our food saver, put it on good and tight. And well, power on, accessory, and we're removing all the air. And that's got it. Take this off first. Pop off our lid, being careful not, even though this is now really tight on here because that's a vacuum inside. And it doesn't pop anymore. The lid is all the way down. Next, that is a Sharpie. I forgot to grab one here first. And forgot to mention, when you get this out of the freezer, don't immediately start doing this. Let it sit, come up to room temperature for a few days. You don't want to be trying to do this with frozen rice. Well, for one thing, then you'd be getting condensation inside your jars. But we will put frozen 323 and sealed 423. You notice I don't bother with the day because it's going to be years out. Hopefully, years out that I'm using this. None of us hopes to have an SHTF. And we put our lid on good and tight, and that finishes our method for glass. Our second method here is going to be using our food saver with the food saver bags. You want to pull out the length that you're going to want. I'm going to keep this one fairly short. I'm also using the smaller bags. I wanted to show you they come in basically two different sizes. There are others. But first thing we want to do is these food saver go all the way through. You don't want that when you try to fill it with rice. You'll just make a very large mess. And even Baker wouldn't like that one. Now we'll hit the seal button. Well, first turn it on. Hit the seal button, and now it is heat sealing what was going to become the bottom of the bag. Should be done here in just a second. And come on. There we go. Now, I'm going to fill this with rice, but before I do, so that it's not too challenging to write on when it's very bumpy, I will put frozen. Let's see, that was 323. And then sealed 423. And if I didn't already mention, you don't need the date on there. These are probably going to be on your shelf, hopefully for years. And as most preppers hope, we never have an SHTF. I hope I never get around to eating all this stuff. But the way things are going in the world today, I'm afraid we will. I'm not going to make you sit there and watch while I fill this up. I'll bring you back at that time. Now we got our food saver made bag. As full as you're going to want it. You don't want to fill it up too much. It makes it too hard to get it down here and angled into the machine. But we want to get it in there where it'll start sucking the air out. And it should be pretty quick. It's not a large bag, but it's got to work with there. Just about done. There we go. Now it is heat sealing the edge. And come on, let it go. You can let it go. Come on. There we go. Now we have what's as hard as a brick, really. It's because there's no air in it. It's completely, well, vacuum packed, sealed. You've all seen bags like that. Biggest disadvantage of these, though, is that the plastic's pretty thin. A mouse, rodent of any type, is going to get into this pretty easy. That's why I store these in a thick plastic container. The one I use in the basement for most of these, I will put a picture of and put it up here on the screen for you. And that protects them from the little mice critters. And now our third and by far least expensive method of storing rice long term. If you missed my video on storing water very inexpensively, I mentioned that I like V8. And I have a whole lot of these. Once they're rinsed out and washed really well, I can use them to store rice, beans, any other dried product. I've got sugar, flour, a lot of different things I've got stored in these. But because I can't vacuum seal them, I have to take a desiccant pack, also called silica gel, and put in there. And make sure these are resealed. It's another thing, if you're going to do a bunch, do them all at once. That way you're not constantly opening and closing your containers. And this one is the oxygen absorbers. And I'll put one in there. If you notice, I put these in first because I learned through experience that if I put them in last, later it was really hard to tell if I had them in there or not. If I put them in first and I wonder, did I put oxygen absorbers and desiccant in there? Oh, yes, I did. Anyway, take this, fill it with rice. I'm not going to make you sit there and watch me do that. And then we'll be back. And I'm back with you after filling this up. Once again, when you're filling these containers, except for the bag that gets vacuumed, you want to tamp it real good as you're filling it. That not only allows you to get the maximum amount of rice in a container, but there's less air in there now for the oxygen absorber in the silica gel to have to deal with. And we'll go ahead and seal it up real good and tight. And even though that is an airtight seal, because I know, well, it holds liquid. Then, by the way, make sure they're rinsed out, washed out really well. You don't want rice tasting like V8. But then I take electrical tape, which from my days in IT, I have a lot of down there. I must have 10, 20 rolls. Anyway, then we will wrap this fairly tightly numerous times around where the lid meets the jar. And so we're just doubling. Two is one is none. We're doubling up the seal so that we know absolutely airtight. And if I forgot to mention, these containers, the plastic, although thicker than the Food Saver bags, is probably not mouse proof. That's why where I keep these on a shelf in a dark, cool place in the basement, I keep up mice deterrents. I use some of that essential peppermint oil, mouse traps, anything else to keep critters away from my food supply. And if you don't think that's a big enough container, by the way, I haven't written on this one yet. The reminder was looking at this one. It was, I think, pretzels or something that we had. Long grain rice, frozen 121, sealed 221. But there's another sample where you could use well, they're free to you. You're using plastic containers anyway. And if you're really on a budget, there's your least expensive way to put up rice and other dry food for long periods of time. And now I'd like to state, for the record, I am not a FDA official. I haven't researched and read a bunch of FDA sites. I basically use what I consider to be kind of just good old common sense and what I've learned over the many years that I've been prepping. And this is the best way I've learned, 3 different ways, some more expensive than others, to preserve food, which you really should do. If you don't have a month's worth of food at a minimum to feed your entire household, you really need to get to work on it. I have quite a bit here, but once again, as I've stated in other videos, I am the bug out location for several close family members and, and close friends. This is where they're coming to. And considering the situation they might be in, I don't know what they'd be looking at, what they'd be able to pack up before getting here. How quick would they have to evacuate their homes to get here? So I have a considerable stockpile. Anyway, if you like the video, please click that subscribe. Give me the thumbs up. Today's quote is from a Thomas S. Monson, M-O-N-S-O-N. Anyway, many more people could ride out the storm-tossed waves of their economic lives if they had a year's supply of food and were debt-free. Today, we find that many have followed that counsel in reverse. They have at least a year's supply of debt and are food free. Thank you for watching.